Okay, here we go. We're going live in 3, 2, 1.
Grab your mason jars, strap on that apron. It's time for Canning with the Diva, making her mark across the globe, teaching you how to safely preserve delicious recipes. Please welcome your host, Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva.
Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to Canning with the Diva. I'm your host, Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva, and I am so excited to share with you a very fun holiday-inspired episode for you today. And also, I want to give my apologies. I meant to get this out last week, but I've had some technical difficulties that thankfully have all been rectified, and we will get back to a regular weekly show. So definitely make it a point to download onto your favorite podcast listening apparatus or software, if you will. I want to make sure that we stay connected throughout the winter months because I have a lot of really good information and recipes in store that will really, prime the pump for next spring. So definitely make sure you follow me. You can get my podcast on my website, which is canningdiva.com. But anyway, I am so excited we've got Thanksgiving tomorrow. Holy cow, where did this year go? I still sit back and chuckle because even though I've been saying this for over 20 years, especially because, I've just aged myself. I have a child who's over 20. But, it's funny when the kids go back to school it used to be, September, but now it seems to be even sooner before the Labor Day holiday. But as soon as like the end of August hits or beginning of September, I feel like it is just fast forward straight through to Christmas and New Year's. Like I've been saying it all this time, and it's so funny how every year I act like I had just heard it for the first time or it just hits me all over again. Like, wow, this is going to go fast. And here we are. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving. So super excited to share with you as we all gear up for, the fun festivities, the food prep, the meal creation. Sometimes some of us just cook for ourselves. The beauty with being a food preservationist is you can capitalize on all of the favorite culinary traditions, whether it's for yourself or for 20 people, because putting it into a jar, it helps you have that food on the ready throughout the winter. So don't think for a second if you're tuning in, if you don't have a large household or a bunch of kids running around, and you happen to just be by yourself or it's just you and your significant other, that's okay. Canning isn't just about creating something for that exact moment to consume. It's about putting food in jars so that you have that freshness whenever you go to pop that lid to heat and serve or just eat from the jar. So the beauty we have right now is even though things are crazy in our world, we're seeing some good food specials in our grocers. So cranberries, I've got 2 recipes I'm going to share with you today that revolve around that, as well as apples. And those are, for many of us, in the grocery store aisles, plentiful, and they're also on sale. So these 2 recipes will definitely come in handy. And then the other is going to be blueberry pancake syrup. And the reason I chose these 3, obviously it's kind of a variety of reasons, but today's episode is gorgeous gifts in a jar. These 3 recipes are amazing options for you to give as gifts this year. So if money is tight or you just love creating gifts from the heart, these 3 recipes will definitely put a smile on the faces of those who receive them. Now, blueberries may not be in season where you're tuning in from. And if they are in the store, they might be extremely expensive. So the beauty with this recipe is you may create it from your frozen blueberries. So if it's a lot of you like to do your own, we call it here in Michigan, you pick, and you can head out to a blueberry farm and, you pick and pay based on weight. And then you clean up those berries and you freeze them so that way you can enjoy them, for months to come. Well, you can take those frozen blueberries, make the blueberry pancake syrup by simply thawing them, and it'll taste just as delicious as it did had you made it early in the spring when you picked them. Now, again, gorgeous gifts in a jar. The 3 recipes can be gifted all year round. So even though we are approaching, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, there's nothing stopping you from giving this gift any time of the year, birthdays, holidays, just because gifts. So don't pigeonhole yourself to thinking that this episode is just going to focus on Christmas and New Year's. Plus, I do like it for around these 2 particular holidays, because if you are attending a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, not hosting it, and you want to bring a little something along to thank the host, a jar or 2 or 3 of these would just definitely warm their hearts. Sometimes what I have done once before is I took little half-pint jars, and I would put cool, I have this embossing, I guess it's called an embosser. I don't really know if there's another word for it, but it really makes a cool impression onto gold foil stickers that I purchased. And it says from Diane's Kitchen. And then I used raffia, and I tied little name cards around each half-pint size jar. And those were seated at the place settings for the family and friends that I had invited over for Christmas. So that, there's really fun, creative ways to take a homemade, canned recipe and make it a gorgeous gift in a jar. So think beyond just the holidays. But again, hey, if you've got a lot going on around the holidays, this might actually serve you quite well. Some of the other gift ideas that I've shared in various presentations is giving jars as gifts to friends at church, maybe your boss at work, even your next door neighbor. Again, whatever the occasion and whomever the person, nothing will warm the heart of another like the gift of canning. Oh, and be sure to keep in mind, if you have a friend or family member who's new to canning or would like to learn how to preserve fruit in jars for the very first time, my book, The Beginner's Guide to Canning, is an excellent gift. Now, you simply go to my website, canningdiva.com, and I'm going to give you a promo code so that you can save 10% on your entire order, not just the book. But the promo code is GIFTCAST, and it's all one word, GIFTCAST. And that promotional code is good for all of my listeners. And again, you'll receive 10% off of your entire order now through December 22nd. So that's GIFTCAST. And use that during checkout at canningdiva.com. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to start with cranberries. While I see many of you online canning cranberry juice or making whole cranberry sauce, this recipe I'm going to share, which is called my Cranberry-Apple Jam, will be a very welcomed addition to your kitchen. It's a really thick and chunky jam with warm tones of cinnamon and nutmeg. And the best part is it's super easy to make and very easy to preserve. So let's dive into this recipe. All right, so cranberry-apple jam, it's going to yield approximately 7 pints or 14 half pints. You may also preserve it in 4-ounce jelly jars if you're looking to create a variety of jam samples to give as a gift. I've seen people take like the wine bags or cellophane see-through bags, and they just stack these cute little 4-ounce jelly jars up to the top, put a nice ribbon on it, and you're giving them a sample of 5 or 6 different flavors. I am just amazed at how creative people are, and I love seeing it because, again, you're giving the gift of canning, and it's coming from the heart. So if you want to take this recipe and use it for that benefit, you will yield approximately 28 4-ounce jelly jars. Okay, so the ingredient list, let's go through these here. Now, you're going to want to have 3 pounds of apples, which is approximately 9 medium apples. At the end of the day, just make sure you are yielding 9 cups of diced apples. Okay, you're going to peel your apples, core them, dice them, and you want to yield 9 cups for this recipe. So depending on the size of the apple, you might need that full 3 pounds. You might need 12 medium. Again, it's very ambiguous until you start measuring with the measuring cup. All right, you're also going to want to have 4 cups of fresh cranberries, 4 cups of sugar, 1 cup of apple juice, or if all you happen to have on hand is apple cider, you may use that as well. It's going to darken the recipe just a touch, and it changes the flavor just a smidge because, again, there's already some seasonings inside that apple cider, but nothing you probably will even notice. You also want to get a lemon. You want to zest the entire lemon, and you want to squeeze all the juice from the lemon. And last but not least, we've got 2 amazing seasonings that really bring out the warm tones I mentioned earlier. You will use 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Okay, we're going to stop here for just a quick minute and hear from I'm so excited too. I have commercials now, you guys. I'm so excited. So we are going to take a quick break and then we'll get back to the Cranberry-Apple Jam and we'll go through the steps so that you can create it and preserve it. Be right back. How would you like to save yourself a trip or 3 to the grocery store this holiday season? With Instacart, you can focus on what truly matters, spending time getting ready for family and preparing all of your favorite holiday dishes. Instacart delivers groceries super fast and as fast as an hour, which will totally come in handy with all of the baking and canning and cooking that will take place over the next several weeks. Instacart connects you with a personal shopper in your area who can even stop at multiple stores if you need them to. Groceries are delivered right to your door. See, you don't even need to take off that apron. Get free delivery on your first order over $35. Just click the link in my show notes, which lets Instacart know that I sent you, and it helps support my show, Canning with the Diva. Instacart. Make the holidays special. And we're back. This is Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva. You're tuning into Gorgeous Gifts in a Jar. And let's kind of get back at it here. So before the break, we were talking about the ingredient list for Cranberry-Apple Jam. I'll run through that again quickly. And then we're going to dive into the instructions and how to create it, obviously, and preserve it in a jar. All right, so 3 pounds of apples. Make sure they're peeled, cored, and diced, and you want to yield 9 cups diced. 4 cups of fresh cranberries, 4 cups of sugar, 1 cup of apple juice or apple cider if that's what you have on hand, 1 lemon, and you're going to use the zest of the entire lemon and all of its juice, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. Okay, so what I want you to do is make sure that your jars are clean. Now, there's this huge debate about sterilization. I only tell individuals to sterilize your jars or at least bring them to a 5-minute boil and then turn off the heat if you are water bathing a recipe that is going to process for 10 minutes or less, because all you're doing is just giving everything that extra leg up. Okay. The likelihood that there's some type of bacteria in the jars that may have been, sitting because you're reusing them, it's very slim to none, but let's not, take the chance, right? So go ahead and just clean them up. If you don't have the stovetop space, and I'm going to raise my hand here because I'm one of those that my stove is reserved for creating the recipes. I really don't give up a lot of that space to boiling jars. I tell all of you, and I do this all the time, throw them in the dishwasher, do the quick rinse cycle, which is going to be done by the time you're done peeling those apples. Okay. And then just leave them sit in there until you're ready to start filling them. And then the other debate is, do we boil the lids? Do we not boil the lids? And here's what I tell everyone, and because I do this myself. If I'm pressure canning a recipe, I just rinse the lids off, obviously, because they're coming from a manufacturing facility. I just give them a quick rinse right over the sink in some warm water, and then I place them on the jars, throw them in the pressure canner. If I'm water bathing, however, I put my lids in a small little sauce pot, bring it to a quick boil, and then just shut them off and leave them in there. Okay. You do what's right for you. Nowadays, the manufacturers are telling us there's no need to pre-boil them. It really doesn't make much of a difference from their testing, I guess. But I don't know about you. I think for me personally, I like to soften that little bit of compound, okay, on every lid. It's especially because it keeps getting thinner every year. But I know when I water bathe, I'm only getting the water temperature up to 212 degrees. So if I'm going to clean those jars, I might as well make sure those lids are clean too and just give them a quick, like I said, a quick boil and just let them sit there until I'm ready to use them. I just feel like I'm doing that one extra thing. Do I have proof from a molecular level if I've killed off any possible bacteria on that lid? Well, of course not. None of us do. But we want to do what we can in the kitchen to be as safe as possible. And so, again, get those jars cleaned and rested, ready and waiting. And same with the lids, if you so choose. All right, off my soapbox. Okay, so now I need you to get a large pot. I want you to combine those diced apples, the fresh cranberries, the sugar, and the apple juice or cider. And make sure that when you bring this to boil over a medium-high heat, that you're stirring it frequently. Depending on the pot you're using, like many of us have very thin bottom stainless steel pots. Others of us may have a thicker cast iron pot that we use for jam making. Whatever it might be, just make sure if it's thinner and it's coming in closer contact with that heat, that you are stirring it frequently. You do not want to scorch your jam, because once you do, you really can't get that flavor to go away, and it's always going to taste burnt. So keep that in mind. If you have a high-powered stove, you might want to put it on low to start instead of medium, or do medium instead of medium-high. You know your stove better than I do. Now, once you've brought it to a boil, excuse me, reduce the heat to low, and now you just want to simmer it for about 15 minutes. And you're going to, of course, continue to stir it frequently to turn and blend the flavors. You want to make sure you're pulling the hottest bottom portions up to the top and you're circulating everything. Now, after that 15 minutes, add the lemon zest and the lemon juice, the cinnamon and the nutmeg, and go ahead and mix that really, really good. We want to disperse those flavors, and we want to get that added acid throughout the entire recipe. Excuse me, guys. Okay. Now, after you've mixed everything well, I want you to allow that to simmer for an additional 10 minutes. And the reason we're doing this is we want it to thicken. So just like as if we were making cranberry sauce, using the ingredients throughout this recipe, having the apples in there with natural pectin, the cranberries themselves, that bit of sugar, you're going to start to see it gel up and get into its jam-like form, okay? Now, depending on your pot and your stove, if you happen to have it gel up a bit quicker than 10 minutes, just turn it down a little bit more and continue to let it thicken. I would just not let it thicken the full 10 minutes on that higher heat if for instance, it's gotten thick at minute 5, okay? All right, now take your hot jars, place them on a cutting board. You're going to use a funnel and a ladle, and you will then place the jam inside each jar, leaving a 1/4 inch of headspace. Remove any air bubbles and use that headspace measuring tool to remove any air pockets that might have formed because the jam is thick, and then add additional jam if necessary, being sure to maintain the 1/4 inch of headspace. As always, wipe your jar rims with a washcloth dipped in vinegar, and then place that lid and ring on every jar and hand tighten. Now, when you go to get your water bather going, make sure you put a couple ounces or at least a big tablespoon of vinegar into that water. The water bather water will unfortunately carry through whatever comes from our groundwater or our city water. So whether it's mineral deposits, calcium, whatever it might be, you can avoid the cloudy white powdery substance that shows up on the jars. You can avoid that by throwing some vinegar in the water. So make sure you do so. And then place your jars into the water bather and ensure that they're covered with at least 1 inch of boiling water. And you're going to process your pints and your half pints for 10 minutes. And then, of course, many of you already know this, but for those of you new to canning, make sure you do not set your timer until that water is at a full rolling boil, okay? And you're going to know that because the loosely fit lid on the top of that canner, you're going to start to see some steam coming out because it's not tightly fit. You're going to see it active. You're going to see that steam. That is your indicator that water is moving and active, which means 212 degrees. You can also take that lid off really quick or just kind of peek in to see if it's at a full rolling boil. And if it is, start your timer. This recipe only needs to be processed for 10 minutes. And that's it. Another tip that I'm sure if you've tuned into other episodes, you know I've always told you, after it's done processing, you want to make sure that you remove that lid and let that canner sit alone by itself, undisturbed, for 5 minutes before you even take the jars out to cool. This is going to help avoid siphoning, and it's going to just let everything calm down before it starts being moved around, okay? You don't want your lids to not seal. And this quick little easy 5-minute tip of just letting it sit still will help your lid failures cease. Almost all of them. I mean, there's always going to be those rare occurrences where a lid doesn't seal for whatever reason, but I've noticed some of you in our Facebook group, Canning, Dehydrating, and Long-Term Food Storage, some of you have been really experiencing some lid failures and liquid loss. And some of you have run into some scammers out there and have purchased some really cheap lids. Others of you, however, are just needing these little bit of steps, these little tips to help avoid the lid failures and the liquid loss, or siphoning is also what it's called. Okay. Excellent job on this one. I love this cranberry apple jam. Last night, I was up pretty late making cranberries. I think we're all kind of in that mode. I was making the cranberry sauce. I'm making a side of the cranberry apple jam. I'm having a lot of fun, but trust me, by the time these are all in jars, I probably won't want to look at a cranberry again for a while. Oh, but it's coming along nicely. So I'm excited to make this right along with you. So I do hope you enjoy it. And I'd love for you to post pictures of your culinary canning creations on my Facebook page, Canning Diva, or in our Facebook group. It's private. You're welcome to join us. It's for all of you who enjoy the art of food preservation, whether it's canning, dehydrating, freezing, freeze drying, long-term food storage, just as a whole. It's called Canning, Dehydrating, Long-Term Food Storage. It's on Facebook. Go ahead and sign up. Me and my moderators, we review the individuals that want to join. Probably, gosh, I want to say at least, I'll just say it this way, throughout the whole day. We get a lot of interested folks, so we are always on there making sure that we're accepting the invitations and making sure that you can be a part of the group. But anyway, let's get into the next recipe that is super fun. I love cinnamon apple rings. The gorgeous red apple rings, they bring me back to my childhood. My mom would make a batch of these and she would use them to decorate her relish trays. And then she would serve the cinnamon apple rings alongside our Christmas ham for our Christmas dinner. And it's nostalgic. They're beautiful. They taste amazing. They're just, they're so nostalgic for me. I was happy to be able to share this recipe with all of you in my cookbook, Beginner's Guide to Canning. Now, for those of you who you see the word cinnamon apple rings, and typically what we've noticed is people like them kind of spicy hot. They're not hot in a heat, burn your tongue sense. They just have some really good cinnamon tone to it and a touch of sweetness. So even your little ones like me, when I was growing up, can enjoy eating them. Okay, now if you're selecting apples for this recipe, this gets a bit trickier, so I want to share with you some tips. You want to make sure that you're picking firm, crisp apples like Red Delicious or Granny Smith, Golden Delicious, Gala. You can even use Fuji. I have found, depending on where you live, of course, in Michigan, I have access to apples all the time. We seem to be the leader in apple growing, right? But sometimes bigger isn't always better. So I gravitate towards Gala or Fuji, which tend to be a bit smaller because they have to fit the diameter, okay? It has to fit into the wide mouth jar. So another tip when you're picking, okay, firm and crisp apples, right? Okay. Now you got to make sure that they're not too big. So the key is to pick an apple that is not larger than 2.5 inches in diameter. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to have to shape that apple with a paring knife, and you're basically wasting all of that yumminess. And so if you get them a bit smaller, once you core them and peel them, they'll slip right into the jar and it'll be easy peasy. Okay, so this recipe is going to yield roughly 8 pints, and a great deal of the yield is going to be dependent on how thick you cut your apple rings and then how many you fit into a jar, while obviously maintaining proper headspace. So I often tell people you can just keep making, you can make as many as you want, buy a bag, and then based on how many you yield, you could then create a batch or double batch of the actual liquid to pour over those apples. Okay, let's get into the recipe itself, or excuse me, the ingredients, and then I can kind of walk you through that as an option. Now, the first set of ingredients I'm going to have you set aside because they are specific to a citric acid bath, which is going to help you keep your apples from browning while you're slicing them. And the second part of the ingredients are to actually make the recipe itself. So first half, I want you to start with 10 cups of water, and I want you to divide that. So set aside 5 and 5. And I want you to also make sure you have a 1/4 cup of bottled lemon juice on hand. That is going to be used for your citric acid bath. Now, 30 medium apples. Again, I gave you the diameter. You want to go 2.5 inches or smaller in diameter. And you're going to want to have about 30 of them on hand in order to yield approximately 8 pints. You're going to core them, you're going to peel them, and you want to slice the rings about 1/4 inch thick. You're also going to want 3 cups of sugar, 2 cups of distilled white vinegar, 1/2 cup of agave nectar, 6 cinnamon sticks, 1 tablespoon of whole cloves, and this is optional, 2 tablespoons of red food coloring. Now, many of you may have an allergy to food coloring or those dyes, or you just don't want to put that as part of your home canned regimen because you think and believe that it is just unhealthy. Totally fine. I get you. So an alternative, and this is what my mom used to do, is she would take those red hot candies. They're super cinnamony, kind of spicy. That's why I mentioned that spicy hot flavor earlier. She would take those candies and she would put a tablespoon of the red hot candies into each jar. And that red coloring, well, it's probably dye anyway, isn't it? But that would then color the jar. I don't know if it has like the specific dye that some of you have an allergy to. So you're going to know better than me because this is something that you live with every day. But just know if you don't have the red food coloring or you want to omit it, that portion is completely optional. Okay, so now what I suggest too is same concept with keeping the jars clean and rested in the dishwasher or in a pot. Again, they don't have to be like fully sterilized. They just need to be brought to a boil and then go ahead and have them resting and waiting for you to pack those jars. Now, once you have your jars going, I want you to get a large bowl and I want you to take 8 cups of that water to the 1/4 cup of bottled lemon juice. I thought it was 5 and 5. See? I have half on the brain today. I think it's because I've been halving and also sometimes doubling my recipes upstairs. Anyway, so 8 cups of water and the 1/4 cup of lemon juice. That is your citric acid bath. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to slice those apples, and as they're sliced, just put them right in that bowl. It's going to protect them from getting brown until you're completely done and then ready to pack the jars. Now, in a large pot, I want you to combine the sugar, the remaining 2 cups of water, the vinegar, the agave sweetener, the cinnamon sticks, the cloves, and if you're using it, go ahead and add the food coloring. And the goal here is to just bring this to a boil using like a medium-high heat, and you're going to stir it so that all of the sugar dissolves. Then once all the sugar is dissolved, you're going to reduce that heat and you're going to simmer it for 5 minutes and turn it off. You don't want to overboil this because we don't want to have all of that water evaporate. You're going to then remove the cinnamon sticks and discard them. Or what I've done before, I've taken the cinnamon sticks and just broken them up, and I've slid them down or placed them in the center of the apple rings when I'm packing the jars. It's going to really make a robust flavor, so keep that in mind. But also with those whole cloves, I've kept them. I like to see them floating in the jar, and I really think the longer it sits, you're going to get more of that pungent flavor of the apple ring. So your call on that one. Otherwise, discard. Now, drain those apple rings that were sitting in the citric acid bath in a large colander in the sink. And then you're going to take your hot jars and place those on the cutting board, and you're going to raw pack the apple rings into each jar. And you're going to stack them all on top of each other, but make sure you leave a 1-inch headspace, okay? Now, using a funnel and a ladle, you take that hot syrup over the apples, and now you bring that headspace to a 1/2 inch. So you see what we're doing here? We're giving plenty of room, because what I need you to account for is those apples are raw packed and they contain liquid. So as things heat up, some of that liquid is going to get pulled from those apple rings, okay? And it's going to fill that jar. If we don't give things some space to move, we're going to wind up with it getting right up to the top of the jar. And then that's going to, unfortunately, pose a possible problem with the lid not sealing. Now, if you filled, like some of us, I don't know if you guys have done this yet, but have you done the fried green tomatoes? Well, they're not fried. You're just raw packing the green tomatoes so you can fry them later. Same concept there. Filling it all the way up to the top and not leaving enough headspace has caused lids to not seal. So fill the apples to 1 inch, liquid to a 1/2 inch, and we've pretty much alleviated that problem. Okay, now wipe those jar rims with a warm washcloth dipped in vinegar, and then place the lids and rings on there and hand tighten. Now, this recipe is going to boil just a tad bit longer because we have a bit more density with the solid apple rings. So what we are going to do is process the pints for 15 minutes. Now, for those of you who may choose to do a quart wide mouth jar, you may do so. That helps you get a little bit bigger of an apple size. You can get more of closer to 3 inches in diameter. So for those of you that really want those super big, Red Delicious or Granny Smith apples to make these apple rings from, a quart size jar will do. But now you're going to want to process the quarts for 25 minutes. You're going to add 10 minutes to that processing time. So keep that in mind. And you're definitely going to want to make sure you have enough ingredients to make a second batch of syrup if needed, because we've increased the volume substantially. It's funny when you're dealing with liquid versus the solids, how much more you'll go through. That's the fun science and math of home canning, I tell you. Okay, so now that we've gone through the cranberry and apple gifts in a jar options, I want to switch gears and do something really fun, which is the blueberry pancake syrup. And the reason I think this is exciting to give as a gift is because of all of the ways you can gift it. This recipe is going to yield 4 pints or 8 half pints. Again, super easy, absolutely delicious. And I think by the end of you canning canning a few batches, you're going to want to keep some of these for yourself. So even though they make a gorgeous gift, for instance, kids love the pancake syrups. And I think that is a really fun way to give a gift if you've got people coming over for the holidays. Instead of giving them a jam or something that they may not like or you're going to wind up eating, you can actually gift them that pancake syrup as their place setting. So you can get really creative with this and I love taking and putting, using my hot glue gun and putting some really cool like ornaments or just some cool things on the jar tops, which I'll go through that here towards the end of the segment. But there's a lot of fun ways to make something like blueberry pancake syrup in a jar very exciting to a kid by even glue gunning their favorite like action figure to it or something. You know what I mean? So you can have a lot of fun with your home canned goods. All right, now the cool thing with this recipe is I'm going to give you like different ways to create a different velocity or viscosity, excuse me, because not everybody is the same. So for instance, if you enjoy having bits of like fresh blueberries on your pancakes or your waffles, one way to achieve that with this recipe is to mash your berries using like a potato masher and don't strain them. Okay, leave the berries whole. Now, if you prefer no chunks, but you do like it to be a bit thicker of a consistency, then use your immersion blender. And you can now reduce the waste of straining, and you can make really quick work of those whole berries. They're just now blended, which is going to naturally thicken that. Okay. Now, some of you out there, you might prefer your syrup to be the consistency of maple syrup, no matter what it is, right? Well, if that's the case, you can do that with this recipe as well. What you're going to do is you're going to strain the recipe through a cheesecloth before heating it and then filling the jars. And that will remove any of the bits and pieces of the berries, the blueberries, so that way, once you make the recipe, it's the consistency of liquid essentially, right? So whatever suits your fancy, or the fancy of whoever you're giving this gorgeous, scrumptious gift to, you have those three options, and make sure you keep that in mind so that way you're happy and whomever is receiving the gift is happy. Okay, so let's dive into the ingredients here. We are going to start with 5 cups of fresh, or remember I mentioned you can do frozen, 5 cups of either fresh or frozen blueberries. If you are using the frozen blueberries, I ask that you thaw them out in the refrigerator the night before, because you're gonna get a lot of liquid, right? And it's gonna be gorgeous blue liquid. Keep that, okay? Don't toss that. But that's why I want you to thaw these in the refrigerator so you're capturing that liquid and you're not wasting it in a strainer in the sink, okay? All right, so 5 cups of fresh or frozen blueberries, 2 cups of water, 1.5 cups of sugar, 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice, and 1 teaspoon of either vanilla or almond extract, which is completely optional. It's just going to give another undertone, some type of flavor based on your liking. And if you don't like either, you do not need to add it. Okay, we're going to take a little break before I dive into the ins and outs of making this amazing gift in a jar blueberry pancake syrup. We'll be right back. I am so happy to be teamed up with Denali Canning Company. Denali Canning is doing their part to create and curate the absolute best canning products for every canning enthusiast for generations to come. A family-owned business, Denali Canning recognized what was truly missing from the canning and preserving industry. What was missing was all the love and passion that you put into creating products. This group of fellow canning enthusiasts have brought back the heart to the canning and preserving industry, and it shows. Denali Canning is making superior canning lids and rings and is working diligently to keep them in stock for us all year round. Denali Canning is doing something extraordinary for all of us who preserve food in jars. Head on over to canningdiva.com and take advantage of a special I'm offering. Buy 60 lids and you get 12 free. Now until the end of the year. Denali, let's get canning. All right, and we are back. This is Diane Devereaux, the Canning Diva, and you are listening to Gorgeous Gifts in a Jar on Canning with the Diva. All right, we went through the ingredients for the blueberry pancake syrup. Real quickly, that was 5 cups of either fresh or frozen blueberries, 2 cups of water, 1.5 cups of sugar, 1 tablespoon of bottled lemon juice, and 1 teaspoon of either vanilla or almond extract, which is totally optional. Okay, so just like the recipes beforehand, we wanted to make sure that those jars were clean and ready, and of course, leaving it to you on if you want to pre-boil your lids. Now, in a heavy bottom saucepan, combine the blueberries, water, and sugar. Now, I'm going to stop here for just a moment because those of you that have used your frozen blueberries and you thawed them out in the refrigerator, I want you to go ahead and retain that liquid by dumping it into a measuring cup. And if you yield 2 cups of water, well, basically 2 cups of blueberry water, right? You may use that in place of the regular just 2 cups of water that the recipe calls for. If you've strained them already and you didn't capture that blueberry water, no worries. You'll just use the 2 cups of water. So if it's fresh, go ahead and follow the ingredients. If you have thawed out your frozen blueberries, the 2 cups of required water can be met by using that liquid during thawing. Now, bring together over a medium-high heat all of the ingredients. It's going to come to a boil, and then you're going to reduce the heat and simmer for 5 minutes. Now, just like every jam or syrup or jelly, anything that you make, you're going to want to stir, especially because it has sugar. You're going to want to stir that frequently to avoid any scorching. And the goal here is to just go ahead and get everything to blend well. Now, for those of you who are using the fresh berries and you prefer to have like the berry chunks in your syrup, this is at the point during that 5-minute simmer, you're welcome to mash them with a potato masher instead of just relying on the quick heat to do so. Yes, the heat will kind of burst those berries open. However, we're not letting it simmer long enough or even boil long enough for that matter. So a potato masher will help break those berries open. Okay, now after the 5-minute simmer, I want you to add the lemon juice and add the extract if you're using it. And then I want you to mix it well, simmer for an additional 5 minutes, stirring often. Okay. Now, again, depending on how you're going to do this, if you're going to leave the berries whole, you're going to proceed to this next part of the instructions. If you want to puree them, go ahead, and this is at the point where you use your emulsion blender to get it just a tad bit thicker than liquid and not as chunky as leaving the berries whole. And then for those of you who want it to be very, very thin and have no bits and pieces, this is the point where you're going to set it aside. You're going to let it cool to the touch, and you're going to strain the syrup through a cheesecloth. Now I want you to, depending on those steps and whatever you have performed, I want you to make sure that you have got those hot jars on the cutting board, and you're going to get ready to fill them with one of the 3 options that you choose. Using a funnel, I want you to then ladle the hot syrup into the jars and leave a 1/4 inch of headspace. Now, for those of you that are leaving it nice and chunky, you're going to want to make sure you remove any air bubbles or pockets that may have formed when you were filling that jar, and go ahead and add any additional syrup to maintain that 1/4 inch of headspace. Wipe each jar rim with a warm washcloth dipped in distilled white vinegar, and go ahead and then place your lid and ring on each jar and hand tighten. Now, these are going to water bath for 10 minutes. And whether you're doing half pints or pints, it's 10 minutes, okay? Now, again, after processing, you want to make sure you let everything sit for about 5 minutes with the lid off of the canner, and then remove your jars and place them on a cutting board to cool. All right, so now that you have 3 fun options to give as gifts this year, I want to extend the fun by giving you some ideas on ways to decorate your jars with festive pieces to complete the experience. And you can do this no matter what you have in a jar, right? So if you already have taken the time earlier this summer and home canned cowboy candy to give away as gifts, which is, oh my gosh, one of my all-time favorite recipes. I love it. Basically, it's sweetened or candied jalapenos. Or I think one year I gave away my what's it called? The pepper jelly. And that was a big hit. It doesn't matter what you're giving away. You can have fun decorating those jars and make it as festive for the occasion as you see fit. So earlier I had mentioned you can, if you're giving away the blueberry pancake syrup to a child, you can hot glue gun their favorite action figure to the lid, right? And that would be something fun that every time, they pull the syrup out of their refrigerator to use on their pancakes or waffles, that cool action figure is right there, right? I mean, there's some really fun things you can do. With Thanksgiving and Christmas on the rise, I'm going to share with you some ideas specific to the upcoming holidays. So for instance, if you are using this to give away at Thanksgiving, you can hot glue gun fake fall leaves to the top of the jar. I've also seen at the dollar store those really cool small foam pumpkins, right? And use raffia maybe to tie as a ribbon. And then a handwritten thank you note. Slide, just do a nice little hole punch on the corner of the note and slide the raffia through there and tie it on. The possibilities are endless. I mean, I've even had my daughter, when she was like 5 years old, go out into the yard. We had little tiny pine cones that would fall off, and I gave her a little brown bag, and I set her out there, and she had so much fun collecting them. And then we hot glue gun the pine cones to the lids. I mean, possibilities are endless. I just hope I'm giving you some really cool ideas that you can use. Now, as far as Christmas goes, you can have all kinds of fun. Ornaments are probably my biggest go-to, whether you go to the dollar store or the craft store. There are so many cool options. And then what I do is I just hot glue gun the hanger to the top of the lid, and I let it kind of fall to the side. Also, what I've done before is I've gone to like a quilting store or a fabric store, and I have picked some really cool festive fabrics based on whatever it might be, because they have everything there, right? Whether it's Valentine's or Easter or Christmas, you name it. And then I have cut nice little square swatches to then place on top of the jar and then tie it with either yarn or ribbon or something really cool that matches. So those are just some ideas. Now, regardless of what you do or how you decorate it, promise me something that you remember this tip. If you're going to give away your home canned goods as a gift, always remember to give them a ring. While we may not store our home canned goods with the ring on, right? When you give it as a gift, they need a way to seal that lid back on if they're going to store it in their refrigerator, especially if it's something that's going to last a while, like the 3 recipes we talked about today. So if they don't have a ring because they're not canners, they're going to have to either then take everything out and put it into Tupperware, or they may not know it needs a ring, and things will spoil quicker if it's just a lid resting on a jar in the refrigerator. So whether you tie the ring using the raffia to the side, or you somehow leave it on there when you put the fabric on top, whatever you do, just make sure that they get the ring so they can enjoy that gift for several weeks while it's in their refrigerator. Okay, you guys, thank you. Thank you so very much for tuning in to Canning with the Diva. I am just blown away every week when I launch a new episode, how many downloads I get. And I'm just so thankful to all of you. Make sure that you share the podcast with your friends and family who enjoy food preservation, because I definitely want to see my listenership grow. And I just thank you for sharing that love and passion with me as we explore this time-honored craft. So thank you. Oh, and just a reminder, use the coupon code GIFTCAST on my website at canningdiva.com and save 10% on your entire order now through December 22nd. All right. Well, be sure to tune in next time. Download my podcast, head over to canningdiva.com, and definitely stock up on some canning lids. I am selling Denali canning lids. They are phenomenal. I'm giving a really cool special where you buy 5 packs, you get 1 free. So now you get 72 lids instead of 60, or for the price of 60. That's over at canningdiva.com. I am loving these Denali lids. I really enjoy having a family-owned business. I mean, it's like, a sister to me, if you will, or a brother to me, because I'm in the same boat. I'm a small business. I work my tail off to grow. I work my tail off to get new clients. And, I remember what it was like 10 years ago when I was the new kid on the block. And so Denali's in that same boat. And I've been very, very pleased with the endurance. Those lids, I can notice that the lids have a bit thicker of rubber compound than even the ball lids, because they have kind of seemed to lessen a tad in quality. They still work, don't get me wrong, but I know we're seeing a lot more lid failures than we ever have. So having a variety of different brands and go-tos on hand is going to be very good for us canners. Also, I'll be adding reusable canning lids to my website soon. So keep your eyes open for that at canningdiva.com. All right, everyone, until next week, I want you to have a wonderful Thanksgiving with all of your loved ones. And those of you who may be alone, or it just might be a very small gathering. A small gathering doesn't mean small fun. It means huge memories. So definitely create them, and happy canning.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Canning with the Diva. For tips, recipes, and techniques, please visit us online at canningdiva.com.